Welcome to Trail Manners, the podcast so dedicated to mountain trails and running that they broadcast out of a 78 Volkswagen bus in the mountains. Who does that? Eric and Joel are your hosts and will bring you the trail life as you may have not heard it before. You hear about everything from gear reviews, nutrition to keep you upright and moving forward, and they'll even bring guests into the bus for conversations that you won't hear anywhere else. It's time for some running adventures on a higher elevation. The old 78 Volkswagen bus is fired up and headed to the mountains. Here are your hosts for Trail Manners, proudly representing the 801 with their passion and love for the trails, Eric Manning and Joel Hatch.
Welcome to the Trail Manners Podcast, episode number 55. Today, we're going to be talking with Chelsea Hathaway, fresh off her Bear 100 third place finish for the women. So if this is your first time listening, then thanks for coming. The Trail Manners Podcast is produced every week for your enjoyment, and show notes are found at trailmanners.com. Come back often, and please feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Trail Manners. All links from the show notes. Now let's get after it. All right, welcome to the Trail Manners Podcast, episode 55, number 55 today. We're in Studio 78.
Barely.
We decided to try and meet our guest a little closer for her,
right.
Which wasn't that close, but
No, it wasn't.
but I knew we weren't going to make it anywhere further south today. The bus has been a little finicky.
Yes.
It doesn't like to go without sputtering. So after this show, we're going to take it in to get a little work done, hopefully. But we are, again, we're at the start area of the Wasatch 100.
Right.
Nestled right up against the mountains and just snugged right up near the bathrooms, too.
Oh,
so
yeah.
If we take a break, you'll know why. But we have an awesome guest today.
Yep.
We're super excited about this one. We were surprised she accepted the invitation to jump in the bus. But we have Chelsea Hathaway with us today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for driving down because you live a little further south.
Yep.
Well, it's not too bad. It's not much of a problem. It's actually kind of nice to get away from the kids for the day. So
right on.
I'll take any opportunity.
So, I mean, we'll just kind of jump into some things here and just tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe how you got into trail running, but just, give our listeners a shot of who you are.
Sure. You probably haven't really heard of me, which is great. I kind of like it that way.
Ooh, yeah. Flying low.
But I actually, it's funny. I decided when I was pretty young that I was going to be an ultra runner. I was probably like 15, and I went to Big Mountain to watch my aunt's boyfriend run the Wasatch 100, and he's done it quite a few times.
Right.
And I just remember sitting there waiting for him to come in and seeing the runners coming through and thinking to myself, that's what I'm going to do one day. I'm going to do that. And now what? 18 years later,
right.
I finally ran 100 miles. But so that's sort of where it started, and that's actually when I started running. But I didn't run a ton on trails, but I was an avid hiker, backpacker.
Right.
So that's sort of where my love for the mountains started. I spent almost all of my free time in high school in the mountains or in the desert, backpacking, rock climbing, mountain climbing, whatever I could do to get out. And it was a huge lifesaver for me then when I was younger. And but then with school and work and everything else that happened in my life, I kind of had gotten away from it for a while, but I still ran by myself because honestly, I was terrified to run with another person.
Wow.
I was sure that I was going to be the slowest runner in the world, and that I was like, they're going to hate it. I'm going to be huffing and puffing the whole time. But I love to do it by myself. And when I was 29, I decided that I would go for a run with another person.
Big step.
Yeah, I know. Baby steps for most people. Big step for me. And she was training to do the Ogden Marathon, and she's like, hey, come run 18 miles. And I thought, sure, I can run 18 miles. I ran 6 last week,
It's only 3 more times.
Yeah.
So I can do that. And I went and I ran with her, and I felt great until the last 5K maybe.
Right.
And she's like, you should do the Ogden Marathon. I'm like, it's in 4 weeks. And I was like, sure.
Yeah. I like her already.
Yeah.
I know, right?
So I was
Yeah,
like, sure, I'll run the
She's
Ogden
our type of
Marathon.
runner.
And it was horrible. I mean, it was the worst experience
yeah.
of my entire life. And I decided I hated marathons.
Right.
And I never wanted to run another marathon again, but that I would run a trail race that 5 months later, and I ran the Pony Express 50.
Oh, jeez.
So, so I figured if I slowed down, I think that was my problem with the marathon. I started too fast. I had an awesome first half, and I just blew
got caught up in the moment.
Yeah, I blew up. I spent 10 minutes on the toilet. It was just bad.
Right.
I mean, I didn't have a horrible time, but it was miserable, and I didn't.
I'd have a horrible time, but it's miserable.
My time.
Like
wait a minute.
My actual finishing time.
There you go.
Was
Okay.
not horrible.
Right.
But
the experience
But
was.
the experience was really bad. And funny thing is, it rained. It rained the entire time. So from the get-go, I got used to running.
In the rain.
Well, it's interesting because we do talk to a lot of guests, and especially the ladies, and they usually don't like to run by themselves.
Right.
You know, for obvious reasons. We have a
Unless
couple
it's
that
Jenna Lynn.
Yeah, Jenna Lynn, but she has a different mindset on
Yeah.
that. But so it's interesting to say I didn't like to run with other people.
No, yeah, I was terrified. And I love to spend time in the mountains alone, too.
Right.
I loved it. In fact, maybe that's why Jenna Lynn and I are good friends. We share that commonality. So I ran, and then I was like, I'm going to run 100. And then I had a baby, another baby. So that kind of sidelined me for
It has that tendency
a
to
little
do that.
bit. Yeah, just a little. And then I got back. I got back up, and I was like, you know what? I don't really want to run on a road
Right.
if I can avoid it. I don't like,
Yeah.
IT band issues.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other things that come with that. So after maybe 4 or 5 months after the birth of my third child, I decided to start running on the trails, and I would come and I would go run Grandeur, or I would run Olympus, or I'd go do
Just little hills.
Little hills.
Just little hills. No biggie.
It's more my thing. I'm a really good power hiker, not that great of a runner, but I have a long stride, so that's where I can have a huge advantage.
Right.
And I had met someone at Pony, Jen Richards. I don't know if you know her, but I had met her at Pony, and she said, "Get on the Wrangler page."
Right.
And so I'd been sort of stalking it for a while, and I was like, one of these days I'm going to get the nerve to go on one of these runs. And Jenna Lynn, in fact, posted a run up Superior, and I climbed Superior when I was younger. And I'm like, oh, that's my kind of trail running,
Right.
you
That's
know,
my kinda gig.
as much not running as possible. And so I showed up and had a blast, and we hit it off right away, and I think I got hooked ever since. I spent that entire summer helping her run all of the 11ers that she did. I was on almost all of those with her. I ended up getting every single 11er
So
last summer myself, and had a really, really fun summer. I decided to do the Tushers 93K last year.
Right.
And beat myself up. That was pretty tough.
That's a tough course.
Yeah, and I was just grateful I finished. And then I sort of took the winter off, and right as I was starting to get back into it, boom, I broke my foot.
Into that situation. So, and those that aren't familiar with where we're at, or the terrain or the territory, Olympus, Grandeur, these places
Superior.
she's talking about, Superior, there's some rugged peaks, man.
Steep.
They're
Sustained
steep.
climbing.
Yep, nonstop.
Yeah.
Just getting. I mean, it's not something you're necessarily going to just run up, right? I mean, it's
Most people will not run up those.
Yeah, so I mean,
They're just
there's
gonna
some
power hike 'em.
serious climbing. So those are the things she's talking about. And then back to the Wrangler page she mentioned. That's the Wasatch Mountain Wranglers.
Right. Big group on the Wasatch Front.
Yep, and really all over the place now that people are joining on. But it's but you brought up a nice word right there, and we love to hear that from our guests when you said you were stalking the page.
I was.
Oh yeah, because we do that all the time.
Because that's what we're all about.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
we find a fellow stalker, we just right away we just kind of
kinship.
it's a kinship, and
I
we relax
feel the
more.
connection. I feel it.
We relax a lot.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, now we're not.
I know.
We
I
can't.
mean, I had to stalk her
this
morning.
Yeah.
I do my homework.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like, I don't even know if they really know who I am.
Yeah.
I had to go back. I had to read all your blog posts from your personal blog and from Trail
He
Ultra.
did that background check came back
It did. It
late
came back
last
pretty
night.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got all the good stuff on you. So I
Good.
mean, we got some people. We know some people that can get that. So I mean, you kind of went through your getting into it. Your a little background of yourself, and you were kind of really getting ahead, but I'm glad we stopped you when we did, because we want to get here. I mean, we're here. So those that aren't familiar, and this is, to me, is super cool, and there's many reasons. So number one, last week, or when she ran the Bear 100 this year,
Right.
First of all, the Bear 100, if you haven't heard, me and Joel have been preaching it for a couple weeks now. It was nasty.
Nasty.
And
The nasty bear.
And she's going to give us some insight that we don't have on that. But it was horrible, horrible conditions. They had to change the course. It was out and back. If you haven't seen pictures online, please go check them out because it was heinous. So, but Chelsea, the coolest thing, and I'm not kidding. She took third place for female.
Yep.
Right. And not only that, her time was 26:35, 29th overall.
Which is so amazing.
It's
considering
amazing.
the conditions.
And her first 100.
Yeah,
That's my
which is
first.
even better.
Even more crazy.
You know, that goes along the lines of back half Barlow. That's just not fair.
Right. I know.
Right? He got in
Yeah,
all
he-
those races, and all of a sudden she did first 100, 26 hours
Oh,
on a
what?
really nasty course. You're not making any friends on this
Yeah,
side of
I
the bus
blame
right now.
blame Tommy for that time right there.
Do
In
ya?
fact, he wants me to give him podium credit.
Uh-oh.
So here, that one's for you, Tommy.
There you go.
Get a little shout out.
Little shout out.
But one of the favorite things, me and Joel have talked about this, is how you found out. And this is, we'll get into that too in the thing. But she took third. She didn't even know.
Yeah.
Right? And Matt Van Horn got one of the coolest photos I've probably ever seen.
Picture of the year.
Picture of the year for me. It's
Wow.
like the kind you see on Time Magazine for these just epic events that happen right around the world. Just things it's like,
Oh, you guys are too kind.
no,
No, it is. It's really that good.
It was an iconic photo.
The
and so,
emotions come through
yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
And that
You
was,
don't have to wade through them. They're like, it's right there.
It's
It's raw. You can see the joy in your expression. It's something else. I love it.
and that's the part of that too is just, and we all see it and we all do it, but in social media there's so many staged photos,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So it's
right.
like what's real, what's filtered, everything else. But you could just tell on that one. That was,
Mhm.
I mean, even when he posted, he's like the moment she found out she
Yeah.
finished third female, and just you can't replicate your face, you just
No.
can't, or your body language.
I don't
Nope.
think I could replicate it if I
Right.
tried.
So what
Yeah.
we're trying to say is you should probably retire right now.
I know.
Yeah.
right?
One and done,
Go
right?
out on top.
So before you leave, just drop the mic and you're
yeah,
out.
exactly.
Just don't break it. Let me put
Yeah.
something soft down.
Oh, yeah, we don't want something else broken.
No.
Yeah, in the poor Studio 70. This poor thing. So let's get into the Bear 100. So
Okay.
third female, 29th overall, 26:35, your first 100 miler. But let's rewind to
Okay.
January.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
January, you were all in, right? You were
Yep.
on the wait list for the Bear, but you knew you signed up for.
Well, I had put on the wait list for the Bear just in case I wasn't able to be ready for the Bryce 100.
Okay, and
but
that's
I
in
really in June, and that was sort of my plan. I knew it was a beautiful race. I
Right.
love those. I love UA's races, the
Yep.
scene, everything. So I was really excited about doing that, and being on the Bear wait list was sort of a backup.
Right.
Honestly, it wasn't my initial plan to begin with in January.
That makes us even more not happy with
Oh.
you. But we'll get into that later. So January rolls around, you're heavy into training, and we, Joel and we talk about doing the off-season training,
Yeah.
some strength training and different things, and that's
Yep.
what you were doing,
That's
right?
what I was doing. I hadn't been running for a few months much at all. I'd had a lot of other things going on, and I was like, okay, January, I'm going to hit it hard. I'm going to start going to the gym. I was taking a weight training class 3 times a week. I was starting to run again. Generally, winter is when I actually run, because in the summer I play.
Yeah.
So that's when I try to get my speed work up again and trying to get, my heart working again. And I was getting into it. I was climbing pretty well, started doing, West Grandeur repeats, as everyone knows. Those are horrible.
And in the
a lot
winter.
of
And then where?
a lot of vert and not a
Right.
lot of time. Trying to strengthen myself for that. And in fact, I was going to run. It'd been a particularly snowy day, and I was going to run just Church Fork
Right.
up to Grandeur, which is less steep, less vert. But it was getting late, and the weather wasn't perfect, and my husband doesn't like me, which I totally get. He doesn't like me running up in the mountains alone, especially at night.
Right.
in the
and-
winter.
In the winter, and I respect that, even though he's not concerned about my abilities. There's so
You
many
never
other
know.
factors. You just
Yeah.
don't know what can happen.
Yeah.
And had planned on doing that, and I had a few friends who were going to try to join, but they had commitments, and I was like, okay, well, if I'm not running, I'm going to hit it hard tomorrow at the gym.
Right.
So I did a tempo run on the treadmill, and I went to class, and we were doing some reps and sets of things, and I was doing one leg hops across a line. You're
Right.
just hopping back and forth, and it was my last set, and he said 15 seconds to go, and I was like, oh, I need to get 5 more of these, and then I can move on and I can check off
Right.
another set. And literally my very last hop, my ankle twisted, and you could hear a pop,
Oh.
like loud pop, and I was excruciating pain.
Right.
And I walked out of there and thought, what's going on? I went to a chiropractor. In fact, Jenna took me to her dad, who's a chiropractor, to get an X-ray, and sure enough,
There it was.
it was broken.
Oh.
Yep. So I put a boot on, and everyone's like, "Oh, this won't be a big deal. This is a really common break. You should
Right.
be able to."
Well, who's everybody? Did
I
was
have
that like
friends.
was that
Yeah.
like a
Google?
minute? Was that exactly?
Yeah, I know.
WebMD.
Freaking Wikipedia.
Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It's like, oh, well, this is a Jones fracture. Or this is
Right.
this. Everybody had, because I'd already spent, insurance. I was like, do I really need to go into a doctor if I can just put it in a boot and be
Right.
fine? But I was really determined to heal.
Sure.
So I finally went into a specialist, and he's like, there is no way that's going to heal if you walk on it,
Yeah.
even with a boot.
Right.
Every time you take a step, your tendon is going to pull at the bone.
Right.
And it's not going to heal properly. So you need 8 weeks non-weight bearing.
Wow.
And I was like, what can
Yep.
I do?
You don't understand what I'm training for.
Yeah.
I was like, you don't understand. Well, and how important just physical activity in general is for me.
Right.
I don't have access to one of those nifty hand bikes or whatever to try
Oh,
to
you
get
see
my
in
heart.
like the PT clinics.
Yeah. I'm like, how can I do this? And
Right.
I couldn't do like an arc trainer or
No.
an elliptical or
No.
anything. No pressure, no weight at all. So I spent 8 weeks rowing
Yeah.
with one leg.
That would suck.
And
Just
doing
rowing with
just
2 legs
rowing.
sucks.
No,
my
rowing is the
gosh,
worst. I
it
actually
does.
did crew in college.
Right.
Oh.
And it was the hardest thing I ever did in my life, up to maybe being a trail runner.
Right.
And it was miserable. I hated every second
Yeah.
of it. But
I can understand that. Anytime you work out at Joel's and you walk in on the dry erase board and you see row, that's when I half tempted to say, God, I don't want to get anybody sick. I'm not feeling good.
hard pass today.
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
I can make
Yeah.
it.
Turn right around before anybody sees you. So.
Yeah. So that's what I tried to do to stay in shape.
And so that was 8 weeks.
8 weeks.
Non-weight bearing, just
Yep.
kind of doing that. And
Yep.
then you got excited because it's like 8 weeks is coming up.
It's coming up. I'd spent a ton of time. I'd volunteered at the Buffalo Run on one leg, doing whatever I could just to be out there
Sure.
with
Yeah.
other
'Cause it's fun.
runners. Yeah, the environment's great.
It is.
And he takes me out, puts me in shoes. So I put my nice sturdy Bushidos on, and I'm like, these have a really good sturdy upper, a stiff sole. I should be good. And ended up walking my daughter to school. I lived in Oakley, Utah until just recently.
All right.
And we lived on a dirt road, and I sort of twisted it funny on a pothole in the dirt road that I
Right.
live on.
Nice.
And it just hurt like crazy,
Huh.
and it was not getting better. It
Right.
was every day it was more painful. I went in, and he says, I'm going to put a cast. You've got a couple more weeks to go. So that just crushed me.
Well, yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's 10 weeks at that point.
Yep.
Huh?
So-
Plus an additional week for the week I was trying to walk on it.
Right.
So we're almost 3 months, and I couldn't even walk, really.
Yeah.
So at that point, you kind of
it's
had
like
to
end
think.
of March.
Yeah.
Basically.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I went to Barkley with Jenna, and I had my trekking poles, and that was my first hike.
Right.
Was I hiked up to Rat Jaw.
Oh no. No.
Welcome
Okay.
back.
Yeah. Exactly. Just ease into that next time, Chelsea. Goodness.
I'm gonna go. So I hiked up, and that was my first. That was
Not
my
making
first
any
hike back.
friends on this side of this again.
Well, there's an easy way to get there that is not
Yeah.
the way the runners go, which is the way that the observers go.
Oh,
so
the
that's the way
observers.
I went.
Gotcha.
I didn't take the route that they took
Okay.
up Rat Jaw. Don't
All right.
worry.
All right. Just wanted to be clear on that.
No.
Because it sounded like, my first
Then I went up
first
Rat
hike
Jaw.
back was up Rat Jaw. No biggie.
I did a lap at Barkley.
Yeah.
Just get back into
Yeah,
it.
no.
I am a power hiker.
It is my strong.
Yeah, see?
So you're getting back into it, but I just read Joel stalked the web too, but you were talking about you were going through not just the physical struggles,
Yeah.
and you talk about being active, but you had those emotional / mental
Yeah.
struggles as
Right.
well, right?
Absolutely.
And you say you were hiding them really well.
I think
and-
so. I put on a pretty good public front.
Right.
I know how to come across, how to hide things, but it was really hard for me, especially seeing so many people that I love and that I'm normally up training with.
Right.
Doing these things, and I can't do it. And
Yeah.
so that was really hard. for me originally. And then as the time continued to increase, it seemed like an impossibility that I really started to doubt that I would even be able to run again. I was in so much pain. I just didn't know if I would be able to run. You start to question whether that's even a possibility, and that was to me a really depressing thought.
Right.
So
you're kind of putting on that brave face, and at the same time you're like, okay, it's time to run again, or it's time to hike again. So what happens at that point? Because I mean, you still have those thoughts, those feelings, that anxiety. Is it just something? Because I mean, from your writing, you know, we know that background that you struggled with that. Is that something that just kind of slowly washes away from you, or is it just kind of like gone?
Oh, I think it's definitely was a slow process, but I think there were moments that chipped away at it a little bit quicker, where I started to gain confidence. There were definitely a couple runs in particular where I thought, oh, wow, I can do this again. And that was huge for me.
Yeah, big mental boost.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. But I mean, even coming up to the race, I was still worried. I have times where my foot just throbs for no reason, and I don't know why, and I start to question. And I've had marching anemia, which is a running-induced anemia that I've been battling with for years, and so I was worried I wasn't going to have the energy I needed. So there was a lot of things that I questioned about even being able to run 100 miles at all. Right.
So you get back in the training, and how's that looking for you at that point?
Well, I felt pretty good on my own.
Well,
I'd go out on my own.
I mean, obviously, you're comfortable doing that. That's like your wheelhouse, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where you go, where your comfortable place is.
And then I would go on group runs with, you know, maybe a few friends.
Yeah.
And I would spend the entire time just
worried,
really close to catching them, but not quite.
Yeah.
And that actually was really hard for me.
Just mentally?
Mentally, because they'd be like, oh, we're just going to go on this easy pace. We're going to head up here or there or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I hope when you say easy pace, you really mean easy pace. And they're like, yeah. And then I'm dying, and they're talking and laughing.
Group mentality is. They get together, and all of a sudden it's like,
well, and and it was
right,
and it's totally not even intentional.
No, not at all.
But for me, mentally, it was really difficult.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I need to start doing more on my own. And I kind of backed off running with people in general.
So what was your training looking like at that point?
Because you only had 4 months, maybe, right?
It was the end of April.
Okay.
Right.
So May, June, July, August, 5-ish. 5 months.
Right.
Until the race. It wasn't, at that time, I didn't know I was going to get into Bear.
Right.
I had a pretty good idea that I was low enough on the wait list that I had a pretty good idea, but I didn't know for sure.
Right. So let's back up a little bit. So you get to that 8 and 10 week mark where you're still now in weight bearing. Had you already written off Bryce at that point?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. There were little moments where people would say, hey, you could probably do Bryce afterward.
Yeah, right.
You know, or even during, they're like, well, it's not going to be fast, but you can finish.
Right.
And I was tempted. I volunteered at Bryce for, I was at an aid station there for over 24 hours volunteering, and I ran 5 miles on the course.
Right.
And my foot just throbbed.
Okay.
And I was like, well, that was a really good choice that I didn't
that's a hard
to do
course.
Bryce. Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard course. It's technical.
It's just unrelenting rolling up and down, up and down.
And it was a hot year.
Yeah, that's right. It was record heat.
Yeah, it was a bad year. So I was grateful.
Right.
I'm like, oh, good. I don't have to run in the heat.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know what I was asking for at the time. But
no heat, so that should be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fast forward.
I was running. I had a couple friends that when I ran individually with them, I felt fine.
Right.
I felt good about it. But I think it's easier one-on-one running with people. They're not going to run up. It's just for my confidence, it was nice to do that or to run alone. And so I did a lot of that. And in June, we moved down to the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon.
Is that so you didn't have the dirt road with potholes? You're like,
it was
I
was
we
worried
got a
about
whole
that.
paved street.
It was a huge factor, definitely. I don't do roads very well, dirt or otherwise. So I was like, give me a trail to Red Pine instead. Or,
there you go.
Pfeifferhorn. I'll do that. So I had greater access to trails, and I just started every day. I ran on a trail, and I couldn't do that in Oakley. I'd have to drive pretty far to get to decent trails for running. And I did. I just ran. When I found out bear was coming, I kind of freaked out, and I thought, oh no, I need to run. I've been playing a lot.
Right.
Again, you know, I like to climb. I went up and did, which most of the listeners probably don't know, but Coal Pit, which is a pretty
That's steep
sucker. It's
Yeah.
like, I want to say 5,000 feet of vert in 2.5 miles.
Right.
Wow.
I mean, it's pretty steep.
It's
and
legit.
It's legit. And I felt really good.
Uh-oh.
And I got to we got to North Thunder, and I felt strong, and I felt
Right.
good, and that was a huge confidence booster
Yeah.
for me. And then the next day I went and ran by myself Fife, and I only had 3 hours, and I was like, well, I'll just see how far I can go. Pfeifferhorn's another 11,000-foot peak in the
Right.
Wasatch. And I did it.
Nailed
And
it?
I nailed it, yeah,
Right on.
PR the next day.
PR'd
I
it.
PR'd it. So it was the fastest I'd
cool.
ever done it. And I'm like, okay. And that for me was that was sort of the moment.
That's a big boost, right?
Yeah, that
You're
was
like,
the
okay,
moment.
I can do this,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
As long as I stay healthy, my foot doesn't hurt
As-
too much.
Yeah, well, and downhill I was slow.
Or
That was
just
the
kind of
thing.
babying a little
Mhm.
bit, just being safe.
Every step.
Was it
I
still
mean-
bugging you at that point?
Yes, it was a little. It was definitely, and especially after a long day. So even though it felt fine by the, you hit
end
a
of the
couple
day.
peaks and you're coming down and you have 5 miles down Bell's Canyon,
Right.
which is a horrible, rocky, miserable trail,
Mhm.
and it wasn't very happy. I spent a good month and a half every run with poles,
Right.
sort of as an extra support
in
to
case.
take off
Yeah.
a little bit of the weight from that foot.
Okay.
And as soon as I saw that I was in bear, I was like, oh no, I've got to run.
Right.
And I called Kenzie and I'm like, I have to run. I don't know if I can do this. And she was running the bear
Yeah.
at that point. And she's like, well, we're doing a long run. We're going up Bear Canyon, going around down Farmington. You should come. And I was terrified
Right.
to run 25 miles. You've got
Running.
your one
You gotta run.
climb and then
Right.
the rest of the time you're running. And so doing that was a huge confidence boost.
Right.
Being able to, do that well. And then every weekend I would just get my 25-mile run in. And that was kind of my training plan, was run as much as I can during the week. Take if I have 2 hard weeks, take a week where I take it super easy, try to heal, try to recover, and then get
Right.
back at it again.
Because
So that's what I did.
right before the bear, you had 2 big back-to-back weeks, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you kind of got your last 2 real weeks of training block pretty heavy. So
Yeah,
you
and
were
I
like
did the
150 miles.
Yeah,
something
and I
like
did
that.
the Tushers Marathon like a couple weeks, and Kings Peak a couple. So I sort of had two
Big.
week segments where
Right.
I was able to get in a good amount of miles. No, my longest run was 30. I mean, I never ran more than 30 miles.
Right.
But I was able to get at least one really good solid run in, and I was running consistently through the week.
Nice. So now fast forward a little bit. So you've got all this, you kind of in your head, right?
Yeah.
About the training and the injury and, oh, no, my first 100. And then just within days of the race, it's like, oh, we might do this, we're changing this. I mean, did that play much account in your head, or were you so focused on these other things?
Oh,
I mean,
no.
how did that play out?
was huge. I mean, a week out, the weather looked perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, Thursday night, a little bit of rain, but the
Right.
high was going to be like 62 at Bear Lake.
Yep.
Partly cloudy skies.
Looked like nice tacky trails.
Yeah, you'd get that perfect hero dirt,
Yep.
where it just grips perfectly. You're not getting the dust. I was
Right.
like, this is pretty much as good as it can get.
Yeah.
So as the weather reports got worse and worse, and of
Phil
course,
Lowry made it
yes,
worse.
Yeah,
he
Phil.
did.
He's such a drama queen.
I was going to say, if it weren't for those stupid posts
Yeah.
on the Bear Facebook page
Uh-huh.
about epic weather and
Right.
by the
Sit this
way,
one out.
24 hours of
Yeah.
storm
Yep.
from the beginning,
Right.
Which
Which he was right.
Yeah,
He was right.
nailed it.
yeah, kept hoping maybe not, and then I had a friend who even said, well, you could always do a double Zion traverse. I mean, you don't really, because for me it was like, I wasn't looking to race.
Right.
I wasn't looking to win. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to run 100 miles.
Right.
And so, kind of jokingly putting that idea out there messed with me.
Did it.
Yeah, because I kept thinking, it is beautiful down there.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? I mean, we were driving up there and a tornado.
Yeah.
Literally, we drove through a tornado in Weber County.
Yep.
Yep, that's right by Joel's house.
Yeah.
Because that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know,
Oh,
right?
in
'Cause
Utah.
my backyard is such a
Yeah,
disaster.
Joel's driving down the street on his cruiser bike with the basket,
Yeah.
going to the store to get some tomatoes, and
Store.
tornado.
Yeah. He's got the dog in the basket.
Yep.
And boom.
Yeah, it's a stuffed dog.
Yeah, it's a stuffed animal. We don't want to bring that up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of what, I was like, it messed with me a ton. I was like,
Yeah.
I already feel like I have a lot of things stacked against me on this race.
Right.
Time. I hadn't had much time since my
prepare.
injury to prepare for me mentally 100 miles is a big deal. Also, I had been, like I said, I'd been feeling super weak. You have all of those taper pains
Taper symptoms.
that are
Right.
totally real.
Yeah.
And you go on a run, and I ran up Farmington Canyon Trail, and my legs, my calves just were aching. I was
Right.
like, why? This isn't, all season I haven't felt this, and now
Now, right
I'm
before
a
this.
week out, and I can't
It's
even
like the
run.
phantom limb, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's always, something's
Yeah.
going to happen.
I
Yeah.
know. So it messed with me for sure.
Well,
Sure.
And one of the things, we talked about this before we went on the air, and it's a credit to you, but we talked to a lot of guests. We're in show 55. We've had a slew of runners from, world-class athletes to, people like me and Joel or whatever. So it's always nice to hear a story of somebody like yourself that, has come through some adversity, especially the first 100, because so many people can relate to that.
They can.
Right?
Yep.
People out there that are listening, they can relate more to, like you talked about, you're a stay-at-home mom, you didn't get the training you wanted
Yep.
in. Who feels like they always get the training they want in?
True.
You don't have this maybe background to fall back on at
Yep.
times. So this is part of the reason why this story is so compelling.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think more people definitely feel the same way that I do when it comes to these things. But you hear about all the good things. You hear about people doing remarkable,
Yeah.
Feats and everything.
Well, that's why you're
working
here.
Together.
That's
Well,
why you're here. I know
Sure.
you're going to play it off like you did,
Right.
but that's why you're here. So let's get into the bear.
Okay.
It's a 100-mile race.
Yep.
We don't need to have you go too detailed,
No.
like mile by mile, but
No.
give us some, start line, kind of how it was playing out.
Yeah.
The race itself.
Well, the night before it was a downpour.
Yep.
And I remember thinking, great, this is how it's going to be at the start. And we get to the start, and it wasn't a downpour, but it was raining. Consistent. It was a consistent rain, and I basically sat in the car as long as I possibly could, checked in at like 5:57.
Yeah. I'm here. See you later.
I'm here. I'm ready to run.
Yeah.
And the hard thing was preparing for it when all of a sudden these weather changes happened.
Have enough
All of
gear.
a sudden you need 10 times more
Right.
than you thought you needed. You need to have drop bags with a lot more warm gear or warm clothing,
Right.
gloves, hand warmers,
Mhm.
nutrition. You just have no idea. I literally brought every pair of shoes that I owned, not knowing
Yep.
what I was going to be able to do. And it was raining from
Yeah.
the get-go. And we started, and they're like, all right, go. It's not like a big,
I know, right?
it's not like,
It's pretty anticlimactic. Next
it's
thing
not
you
like
know.
there's a gunshot or
Nope.
anything.
It's like a sip of coffee and zipping up the jacket. All right,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty
all right,
much.
it's 6 o'clock. Go,
Go.
ahead and
You're looking
follow
around.
those
You're like,
flags. So everyone starts running, and,
Yeah.
and you start running. And
you do.
I think something that was great but also really difficult is it started out with rollers. They had to do an out and back on the BST, the Bonneville Shore Trail,
Right.
to get the miles in for the out and back because they had to remove the really high elevation points of the race, which was, looking at it now, the best decision that
Oh,
they
yeah.
made.
Right.
It would have been
Dangerous.
disaster. It would not have been
Dangerous.
safe for the runners
Right.
to be
Or the
running in those.
volunteers to be up there for that long.
Absolutely. And even to access some of those aid
Yeah.
stations
Crews
and that
and
kind of weather
everything
crew,
else.
you just have, there were a lot of problems. So that was smart. But I'm not used to running 13 consecutive miles with just running.
Right.
I'm used to being able to break it up with a climb. And that's the
Yeah.
great thing about bears. It's a climb and then down and then
Yeah.
a climb and then down. There's not a lot of
Flat. Just
Flat
run for a while.
running.
True.
So running 13 miles, my hips started to feel it from the get-go.
Yeah.
The first climb, it felt awesome. I felt really good. I felt like I was, going at an easy pace.
Right.
People were passing me, and I was okay with that. I was
Right.
passing people. I was like, okay, I'm going to run my race.
Yeah.
At that point, I had thrown away any idea of a time. There was just no knowing
Right.
on what the conditions were going to be like, what that was going to do, the new course.
Yeah.
So at that point, I just said, okay, well, I'm going to go I'm going to go spend a nice long, wet day in the mountains.
Yep,
So
pretty
let's
much.
just do this. And I felt great until, I came into Lethem, which
Yeah.
is where I saw my crew for the first time. They're like, how do you feel? I'm like, I feel awesome.
Right on.
So
How was the trail up until that
That was
point?
good.
Was
So
it pretty good?
the Bonneville Shore Trail was super muddy,
Yeah.
lots of puddles. got wet from the get-go.
Sure.
From mile 1.
And you're just, at that point, you're like, I'm
This is
just going to
what it's gonna
embrace
be.
this. I'm not going to try to run around too
No.
many pedals.
There was
just right
no-
through it.
Yep, there
Yeah.
was no reason to at that
Yeah.
point. The trail up Millsview Canyon was horrible.
Right.
Rocky, technical, steep. I was not looking forward to the return trip. I mean, you have rivers running down
Oh, wow.
the middle of the trail because the
Ugh.
rain is so heavy.
Right.
As you're going up, the snow starts to fall. As you're coming up over that pass, you're in snow. Beautiful. I mean, I was just blown away. I think that helped me a lot mentally was
Right.
how beautiful it was despite the really crummy conditions. And
Mm-hmm.
then this beautiful single track, to descend down into that first aid station that you see
Oh,
crew.
yeah. That thing is awesome. isn't
Yeah.
it?
Unreal.
That's hard not to
And
go too fast.
You're- Exactly right.
Well, in fact, I think this was the biggest benefit to my race personally is it was so muddy
Oh.
and slick. You had to force yourself to slow down.
Oh,
I
yeah.
couldn't run the way I would run it.
Right.
And I think even if I'd held myself back, I would have blown out my quads.
Yeah,
if
right.
I would
Oh, yeah.
have
Oh, yeah.
enjoyed that beautiful trail.
That's the best, especially down the bottom. You're going through all those rocks real fast. Oh, man.
So beautiful.
So much fun.
It
Yeah.
is. And I mean, the colors were unreal.
Yep.
And you'd go through the pine and it was just, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
And I had to I forced myself. I had no other choice but to slow down
Right.
or I
Just
would have
to be
slid
safe.
right off the trail
Yeah.
Right.
because it was so muddy.
So you hit Lethem. So your crew?
Crew was
Pumped?
awesome. Yeah, they were excited. They're like, here, they handed me an Egg McMuffin and I
Oh, my.
filled up my water bottle and I
I like
Yeah.
your
took
crew.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're running down that road. How was that road? Was
That-
the road?
The
was it-
road wasn't great for me. It felt, I mean, you're running down it,
Yeah.
which I didn't realize. At the time, it didn't feel like I was running down a road. On the return trip, it felt like I was definitely running up a
Yeah,
road.
exactly.
But like at that point, I had sort of gotten ahead of Kenzie on the climb. I'm generally a faster climber.
Right.
She's much faster on the downhill, so
Yeah.
she had caught up with me at Lethem, and she'd left the aid station maybe a minute before I did.
Right.
And I saw her the whole time
Right.
just in front of me, and I was like, I could push and go catch up with
Yeah,
her, but
there's no need to.
no, and I kept thinking I'll catch her on the uphill. I
Yeah,
always catch
exactly.
her on the uphill, and then I hit my low point physically of the race. I bonked
What mile
at
about
That's
was
mile
like mile-
23.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Horrible,
early into
early,
100 mile.
which terrified me.
Was
I was
that Egg
like, oh
McMuffin?
no.
Yeah.
I think it might have been, but I had to eat it.
Yeah.
You had me an Egg McMuffin. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
not eat the Egg McMuffin.
That's
no.
part of your constitution, isn't
Yeah,
it?
Yeah.
absolutely.
Right?
You give me food. In fact,
That's
there's
part
a,
of your personal clause.
there's a picture of us at dinner the night before, and everyone's done, and I am the only one with a clean plate, and it is clean. I'm a good eater, so of course I wasn't gonna not eat it, but
Sure.
I was really terrified, feeling so crappy right then, that early on.
Just
in the race.
general crappiness? What was
Yeah.
going on? Just your stomach? Was it
No,
your
my
legs?
stomach felt fine. I just I felt kind of
Like
lightheaded.
lethargic, or?
Yeah, lethargic. It makes sense. Most of my runs were around 25, 26 miles.
Right.
So it would make sense that right there, my body's going to tell me, okay, well, you're done with your long run
Yeah,
now.
it's time to go
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
Let's go get another Egg McMuffin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, 3 miles after, I was feeling amazing.
Yeah.
So it was really discouraging.
That's because you were hiking 3 miles after up the
I know.
right.
Up that- yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you start hiking up Richard Hollow, and
Yeah.
it was really muddy.
Oh yeah.
It was really slick.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to take it at my own pace. I was alone for a big part of it, caught up to someone who had, of course, just run Wasatch 2 weeks earlier. Like everybody I swear that I talked to
Yeah.
had run Wasatch 2 weeks earlier. So I'm like, well, I can't complain. And he gave me some licorice and basically stuck with me to the top of the climb. And we
Right.
ran down into Cowley together. And I
How
felt
was coming
a lot
down the
better.
Cowley? Was that super muddy on that road?
You know, the road wasn't too bad. It was pretty quick. There were sections. There'll be sections where it wasn't as gravelly or where the
Right.
the constitution of the dirt was more
Did you
clay.
really just say the Constitution of the dirt?
Hey, you brought up Constitution.
I did, but
That's twice in one
I
show.
think she means the composition.
Composition. Thank you.
Is what she meant to say. Sorry, I had to help you out there
No,
on that
thank
one.
you. It's been a long week.
Still recovery mode.
I am. My body's not quite where it needs to be for a while, I think. But
The composition
the
was
composition
yes.
of the dirt, thank you,
There
was
you go.
pretty bad in
Right.
certain spots. But for the most part, I felt like I could cruise down that.
Yeah,
to
that
get a
one you
nice,
can go
easy
fast
pace.
down that road.
Yep.
Yeah.
Went into Cali. Just my hands were frozen at that point. I couldn't
Yeah.
feel them.
Was it raining or snowing up there in
It
Cali?
was raining at. Well, no, it was snowing
At
at
Cali?
the top. Yeah,
Okay.
at Cowley. But it had been raining most of the time. I had waterproof mittens that I'd put over my gloves.
Yeah.
Just the thin Gore-Tex shell.
Right.
But it had been by the time I thought to put them on, because it was so warm at the start line,
Oh,
my
yeah.
gloves were already soaked.
It's already wet.
Yeah.
So I didn't have clean gloves in my drop bag, but I had socks, so I put socks on my hands.
That works with the
Like the Muppet hands.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah.
You're just
Yeah,
playing
I
Muppet
wasn't. I
hands.
mean, it was just a running down. Whatever.
You know what? I could
Whatever
see
works.
Jenna Lynn doing something like that.
Yeah, Muppet
Having Muppet hands as
Muppet
she's
hands.
running.
with the puppet on
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Absolutely.
They'd have to be Harry Potter.
They
puppets.
would be Harry Potter ones
I'm
too.
sure they had Harry Potter Muppet hands. I could have.
She's got the
I
Harry
could
Potter
have
socks.
used.
Probably just slide them right on.
So yeah, I put hand warmers. I grabbed hand warmers,
Right.
and I did that really long descent into right hand, and I felt pretty good.
How was that descent? Was
It
that
was
just
long.
Was yeah, it's long, but was it gnarly muddy?
It was super muddy. The top especially is really
Yeah.
slick, but I didn't fall. So
Good.
I think, which helped me later on. You don't realize it at the time. You're thinking, man, I'm losing so much time because
Right.
I have to really hold myself back
Mhm.
and make it down this really super muddy, sloggy. The back to rain again. You'd drop down and it would start raining again.
Right.
And
That descent is really pretty. Was it pretty this year?
it was absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, the colors in there are outstanding.
They are.
Red and orange. Yeah.
Oh, the whole thing was actually really beautiful.
Yeah.
I was not at all disappointed, and it was beautiful with the snow.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Just
hate
totally
to say you don't
different
love
element.
running in it, but
Yeah.
it made the scenery really
Mhm.
nice.
So you get down the right hand. How you feeling at that
I
point?
feel pretty good.
Did you?
I'm feeling so much better. I had gotten over whatever hump
Yeah.
I had earlier on, and I was feeling good and really excited to pick up my first pacer
Okay.
and head out. And I had run that section from right hand. I'd run from right hand all the way to Franklin Basin.
Okay.
Now we don't run to Franklin Basin this time because
Right.
of the out and back. But I felt better since at that point I knew
You knew it was
what
coming
I was,
up.
Yeah,
Right.
what was coming up.
You just
what I
had
was
a
getting
short climb after that, and you get on that service road, and you can haul.
you can
on the
haul, yeah, and then you get into the single track again, and
Yeah.
it was super, super muddy, which
yeah.
just really frustrating because it's that perfect assisted grade where
Right.
you could normally go,
Just
and I was
go.
sliding all over the place.
Yeah.
So I think everyone was. I don't know anyone who, but that was also the one section where the rain kind of stopped for a minute.
Okay.
I think over the entire time I was out there, in the first 24 and a half hours, there was maybe 45 minutes where it was not raining.
Wow.
Not all together, but in little
Still
pieces.
breaking up a little
breaking
bit.
up, yeah, throughout the race. And that was one of them, and it was beautiful. I was able to run a lot of that trail up,
Right.
which I was pretty sure I was going to be having to hike,
Mhm.
especially with how I felt earlier, and I was running and feeling pretty good.
Right.
Now, were you having, like, when you were on the trail and all these different locations, even aid stations, was there a lot of chatter, like a lot of people? Were you talking to different people? Was there much of that?
You know, I think I was expecting there to be more, but for whatever reason, where I happened to be, there weren't a lot of. I didn't pass a ton of people, and nobody really passed me.
Right.
Just kinda
I
running
just sort
on
of
your
was
own.
doing my thing, and a couple friends that I was able to talk to on the big climb up at the beginning, and then the descent into Right Hand Fork. That was actually really helpful. A friend, Cody, who I had run with before, was right there, and I said, "We're almost done, aren't we? Down, right?" And he's like, "Oh, we have at least 2 miles to go."
Right.
And it just seemed a lot longer than it
I'm sure.
was.
I'm just kind of wondering the
So that was
mindset,
helpful.
like when you run across people, because so much of it is mental.
You could see on people's faces. I only saw people until the turnaround.
Yeah.
You really don't see people unless you're at the aid station with them. And I
Right.
kind of made a point to spend as little time as possible. So my crew would pull me over. We'd change my socks. I kept my same shoes for 86 miles, and they felt great. So I just kept them. Great, considering
They were
They're wet.
sloggy
they're
and
wet
heavy.
and sloggy.
Yeah.
But you'd run through a river then, or a puddle
Right.
of ice water, and it would clean it off nicely, and you're good to go again. So, but as coming back down out of Tony for the second half, I could not believe the looks on people's faces.
Oh, really?
There was,
Just
devastating.
Walking Dead, basically.
Yeah, they couldn't even look at you. They
Well,
were
coming
just
up
trying
to Tony's no
focus.
joke. That's a long haul.
It is.
It is.
And then that thing is a muddy mess.
That was probably the slickest
Yep.
section right out of Temple Fork.
Yep.
Going up, and in the clay,
Yeah.
the soil is so clay that it's sticking to you, and
It's all snotty.
it was really bad. I had poles on the way up.
Right.
I picked up poles at Temple
Right.
because I knew I would probably want them for that climb, and I'm really glad I did.
Right.
To help me with that. On the way back down, I literally slid backwards and started to slide down the trail like I was on skis.
Yeah.
It was so slick.
Wow.
I'm like, oh, great, I'm coming into oncoming traffic.
Yeah.
You know, the one place you
Yeah,
cross the
exactly.
road, and I had no control. It should have taken like 30 seconds. It was
The
like
highway
5
patrol
minutes
guys
later.
down there catching people.
It was pretty bad. It
Oh
was
my
pretty bad.
goodness.
I tried to make an effort myself to keep a smile on because
Yeah.
it was crappy. It was going to be
Yep.
crappy. You knew the weather was going to be bad. You knew the trail
Mhm.
conditions were going to be bad. There was no use in complaining about it. You just
Not
sort
really.
of embrace
It only
it.
makes it worse.
Because
at
it's
that point.
something you
Yeah.
can't control. It's something
Yeah.
that you really, everybody's facing the exact same
Yep.
thing.
Yep.
So throw all the other stuff out the window. It's just
Mhm.
the one constant.
Yep.
It's the
Yeah.
course
Yeah.
that we talk about.
Mhm.
So you hit Tony's. Do you
Yep.
remember how long your time was to get to
You know,
Tony's?
like I said, I really wasn't paying attention to time. I
Right.
was just, I knew I wanted to be quick. I had to fully change at that point.
Yeah.
My goal coming into the nighttime hours, I got there right before 6 at like 5:50.
Oh,
Okay, so
I
you
got
were
it.
there in about 12 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in about 12, and it's
11-ish.
about mile 52 and a half or
Nice.
53 at that point.
Right.
So I got in, I ate every aid station. I just ate I had something hot to drink,
Right.
either hot broth, hot chocolate,
Yeah.
something to eat, and I'd grab something to go. This time I changed my top. I put tights on. I had been wearing shorts, and I'd been fine up to that point in shorts.
Right.
I had a great waterproof jacket I put over my vest
Yep.
to keep my core dry.
Mhm.
I'd had a baseball hat to keep water from flying in my face and freezing my face. At Tony, I put a beanie on,
Right.
grabbed a extra puffy coat and warm clothes and food, and grabbed something to go, and I took off.
Wow.
So
So you're cozy at that point, just the start.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong. I was cold. I was cold pretty much all the time, but as
Right.
long as I kept moving, I was okay.
Sure.
Stopping was the hardest thing
At aid stations.
because
and-
I'd start to
Shiver.
shake and
Right.
I'd start to get really cold. So for me, the goal was to just keep moving, spend as little time as possible. Now that I had a pacer with me, it
Right.
made it easier. I could go in, they could grab me a sandwich if we
Right.
needed, and I could just keep going.
So were you eating in between these stations?
Yeah,
What
I
were you
was
eating?
I was eating Nutter Butters and
Right.
chocolate covered pretzels.
Wow.
Right on.
That's sort of how I
Is that what
Is that
we're-
normal?
yeah, I was going to say.
No.
Is that normal?
I think usually I can't do that much sweet. I'd
Right.
prefer like potato chips or occasionally I take gels like V Fuel or Hammer
Right.
gels. Sweet is generally hard for me. I think the cold temperature made it easy. I could pretty much eat whatever I wanted. Normally I bring with me on my long runs a Lynn Wilson frozen burrito and Uncrustable
Uncrustable
and then
Lynn
Swedish
Wilson.
fish. And that's generally what works for me
So
on
you're
my
taking,
long
you're
runs.
taking your kids' food.
Yeah.
on your long
Pretty
runs.
much, right?
Pretty much. And it's great because then I fuel with real food.
Yeah.
That's
Right
what
on.
generally I prefer to do. I train that way.
Yeah.
Nutter Butters and yogurt covered pretzels, no, but they tasted really good.
You
so
will now, though, right?
every time I saw my crew, yes, every time
Yeah.
I'd fill up my little baggie of yogurt pretzels, Nutter Butters, and Chips Ahoy. And that is
Chips
pretty
Ahoy.
much what fueled me.
So did you take
Right.
like
To
a
the end.
little sippy cup of milk to wash it down?
I know I needed to drink. Luckily, that was a nice thing is we didn't need as much water.
True.
So it made transitions a lot easier through aid stations. And I ate aid station food every time.
Right.
Quesadillas, potatoes,
Whatever they had.
hot. I had a cup of hot soup or hot
Mhm.
chocolate at every aid station.
Me-
So good calories.
Yeah.
And with the cold weather, my stomach was good. And I took one gel at mile 94. And that was the only gel I had the
Wow.
entire
Wow.
time.
I think me and Joel actually have like some record for quesadillas at the Bear.
They're
A
good.
couple years ago, we hit them pretty hard,
Oh.
right? When we dropped Misty,
seems
changing
confused.
Misty.
Oh, yeah, we did.
See, I'll bring it back to him. He knows.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. That's that aid station. That was at Franklin.
Yeah.
The Ultra
That's
Ultra
what.
Shoe Company was running
They
that
had
thing.
like a
they
little
had like a freaking
taco stand.
Yeah, they had a taco stand out there. They were
Oh,
making
man.
like quesadillas.
And they had
Yeah.
so many quesadillas
Yeah, it
made.
was
They were
crazy.
like, "Please eat more. We
Yeah.
like, have too many." And me
Exactly.
and Joel
Normally
Too
we stay
many
away from that because we
quesadillas?
were there. We were there to support a ride.
yeah, I just barely
right?
got done pacing. Joel was picking up to
Yeah.
pace, and they kept. I mean, they were just like,
They
"No,
kept
we have
shoving it in our
way too
faces. I'm
many."
like, no, that's for the runners. No, we got plenty. Here,
Yeah.
eat. By the time we left, we were good 10 pounds heavier.
Oh, we
at
just-
least.
Well, Joel called it a quesadilla hangover last
Yeah.
year, and that's what we.
I-
had.
I
Yeah.
felt that way. I don't think I can eat a quesadilla for a while. I think
Right.
that was a huge and chicken noodle soup.
Nope.
Hard pass for a while. For a while, I think there were times when I was drinking it down. I'm like, can I just get the broth? I don't think I can handle the noodles
The noodle
anymore.
part. So, and you mentioned before how many pacers did you have?
I
through
had
this?
3.
3. And so who were your pacers?
So Aaron Williams
Okay.
paced me from right hand to Tony, and
Right.
then Matt Williams paced me from Tony to Leatham.
Right.
And then Matt Van Horn took me from Leatham
Okay.
to the end.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how was
good
that
group.
climb out of Leatham back up? Was that
Horrible.
just terrible?
Horrible.
Because I can totally vision myself running down that thing
yeah.
because it's so much fun.
Yeah.
But the thought of turning around and going back up that
Well,
would be
no.
like the deal breaker for me.
The
No.
hard thing about the new course is that the climbs were much longer.
Right.
So you have more climbs in the old course, but they're short.
Yep.
And you have respite.
Yep.
Because it's like, I
You
just
climb
climb for
and
a
then
mile and a half
descend.
and then descend and then
Yeah.
climb and then descend. And this was relentless.
Right.
I mean, 4 or 5 miles
Yeah.
of climbing at mile 85 was
Yeah,
really
that's
hard.
no fun.
And the worst part of the race for sure was coming from right-hand fork to Leatham was by far
Oh,
the
yeah.
hardest. It was a complete blizzard.
Yep.
It was a
Oh,
whiteout.
you had to grind up that hill.
Yeah, that getting up right hand was
Mhm.
the worst climb. I was silent. My pacer was just telling me stories. Like
Right.
he was trying to think of anything he could
Just to keep you going,
to
right?
keep me
Occupied.
distracted
Yeah.
Yeah.
from the fact that I was still climbing
Yeah.
up this. And it was so cold and the snow was coming down. And he kept saying to me, okay, you're not going to spend any time at this aid station.
Right.
I wanted a heater, but I knew he was right.
Yeah.
He's like, you're not going to spend any time. You're going to grab something hot to drink. You're
Mhm.
going to eat something and you're grab something and we're going to go.
Right.
And that's it. And that was at Cowley, by
Yep.
far the coldest,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, whiteout conditions. You couldn't see the trails of the runner in
Oh
front
my
of
gosh,
you
really?
Jeez.
because it was so bad.
So
And
was it
there's
hard
mud
navigating at that
underneath
Yeah,
it.
how was the course markings and everything?
Yeah, no, the course was marked well, and right there, the trail is wide enough. There's sort of a double track from Cowley up to where a single track kind of comes off. But I
Right.
kept sort of stopping and looking, and my pacer's like, I'll find it.
Right.
I mean, you could tell that there were footprints there, but they were covered. Like you just didn't see.
That's crazy.
You didn't
Yeah.
know what brand of shoe they
Yeah,
were wearing, but
yeah.
you knew
Yeah.
they had shoes
you,
on.
you could tell they were wearing shoes. It helped having some direction in that way, but it was hard because your light was hitting the snow.
Right.
You couldn't see the trail very well, and it's mud under the snow. It's not like hard
Dirt.
ground.
Jeez.
Right.
It's mud and
Oh,
ice frozen puddles, and
right.
the ascent down after Cowley, you go up. I didn't spend time. I maybe used the bathroom and then left.
Right.
And I wanted to stay, but I knew if I stopped, I wasn't going to move. And that's where a lot of people got stuck for hours
Right.
yeah.
at Cowley.
I could see that.
So just kept moving, got stuck behind 3 cows coming down. I was staring at my feet, trying to see the trail in front of me,
Right.
trying to just make it. Normally, again, this is a trail you should be able to run down,
Yeah.
Right.
and you can't.
Yeah.
It's so I'm staring, and all of a sudden I see a black butt,
Yeah.
and I scream, and it's 3 cows right
Right.
on the trail.
Just walking all slow.
Yeah.
And where was
Taking their
this
time
at?
coming out from Cowley down to Richards Hollow.
Right,
That
yeah,
that
yep.
descent down back into Richards Hollow, and that was my low point on the way up.
Right.
So I wasn't loving it. Like I knew I didn't like that trail already.
Yeah.
So
Now you're wrangling cattle. So.
and so
Yeah.
I think that may have been the only time during the race I cried. It's when we were stuck behind cows, and my pacer Matt, he was hooting and hollering, trying to get him off the trail, and he'd come over to this side to push him off that way, and 2 miles at least I was stuck behind cows. Finally there was a spot, and he kind of hopped over this log, crossed a creek.
Right.
He's like, we can come over there, and he kind of got him to stop. He got
Yeah.
in front of him. He's like, come this way. He's like, why aren't you moving? And I just stared at this log with 4 inches of snow on it, and wondering how I was going to lift my leg
That was like
over.
Mount Everest at that point, right?
I'm standing in a creek of frozen water.
Yeah.
I can't feel my feet. I can't feel my hands. I can't feel my legs. And that was long and
craving
miserable.
a T-bone
We
because
finally,
of the cows.
yeah, we finally got around him, and then maybe 10 minutes later, we hear runners behind us
Hooting and
screaming,
hollering at 'em.
doing the same thing. I'm like, they got stuck behind the cows.
You're like, suckers, we're out of here.
We're done. So yeah, pretty bad. And then the climb from Richard, quick stop
Yeah,
at Richards.
because
something
then you're
hot.
out on that
Yep.
service road again.
Yeah, and luckily it dropped down enough that it was maybe raining right there,
Right.
and there wasn't snow. That was horrible. I was like, I swear this was uphill on the way, and
It's
like I said
uphill on the way
earlier, it's on the
back.
uphill on the way back to Leatham. And I get into Leatham, and Tommy, nobody's there. I think people had been coming in, and from what I heard, they were coming in and they were looking bad.
Where are they?
Every single person coming into Leatham the second time just looked
And what mile?
dead.
So what mile was that?
86.
Okay.
So I get there, and finally I see Christiane, who was my crew. She was amazing. She's like, come sit down. I have a chair for you.
Right.
I decided I need to change my shoes. I don't know if I can. And I put on a pair of shoes that I regret. But I changed my shoes. I got hand warmers. My next pacer showed up, and Tommy said, female F2 and 3 just left, and you can catch them. And I kind of, for a second, thought, wow, that would be awesome. And then all of a sudden I was like, no, that's not my goal. That isn't what I'm out here to do. I'm out here to run my race.
Right.
But took off, felt good for maybe 100 yards. And then
right before you go up the turn.
Yep.
Yeah, you start going uphill.
Right, when it gets uphill, and then it was probably the slowest, longest climb of my life.
That thing's a grunt. That thing's several thousand feet of climbing.
There was a ton of snow, trees blocking the trail. If you were little, I'm not, people listening can't see. I'm 6 feet tall. I'm not like a little person.
Tall.
Yeah.
I can't just shimmy underneath these.
She's looking at me as she's saying that.
I'm 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
I'm 6 feet tall. It was hard. Matt Van Horn would try to sort of push some of the trees, move them out of the way, but at some point I was just charging through trees covered in snow.
Yeah, just charging them.
Yep, and then the snow stopped on this. It was still dark. The snow stopped, but hit the top of the pass, and the wind was unbearable, and the fog was thick, and I knew I was going to, from the get-go, I said, there's nothing that's going to keep me from finishing this race except for a life-threatening ailment. Like, if I'm, like, about to die, you can pull me. Otherwise, you got to keep me going.
Yep.
And it was cold, and that downhill was technical and steep, and my toes hurt, and I was wearing the wrong shoes at that point.
Okay.
I wanted my other shoes back that I can move in, and I feel really bad for Matt Van Horn because that was rough. I mean, I was probably running as fast as he was slowly walking down that section of trail. And I gave up any hope of passing anybody at that point, but nobody passed me either. I didn't have a single person pass me from Lethem. In fact, most of the time I didn't have a lot of people pass me the second half.
So you knew that F2 and F3 were ahead of you, right?
Yeah, and then I forgot pretty quick.
Okay, that's what I was going to say, because you got about 15 miles from that point to the finish. Mm-hmm. Did you ever remember passing anybody?
I did, but as an afterthought. The last aid station, when there's 5 miles left on the BST, 5 miles of hills that go up, which I was not expecting.
Right.
There was a couple people standing at the aid station, and I think in my mind I assumed they were just
like volunteers
and it turned out they were runners. That was F3, and I didn't stop. 80 or 38 in and out. Yeah. And I just ran through the aids. At that point, 5 miles, there was no reason for me to stop.
Yeah.
Right.
So I kept going, and
there you go.
Didn't even, like I said, it didn't really faze me until afterwards. I looked behind. I saw nobody was going to catch me. I could have maybe run faster there at the end. You always, hindsight's always 20/20. I could have, but I didn't feel great, and I knew I was going to finish.
Right.
And I was going to get my original goal time despite the weather.
Right, which is crazy.
So at that point, there was no reason for me to really push. I hit the pavement, and I was running down that hill and thinking I could maybe beat 26 and a half.
Right.
And Matt's like, you're not gonna. So
just
at
enjoy
that point,
this
I
part.
looked down. I was going like 7:20 pace down that hill, and I was like, okay, this hurts, so I'm gonna slow down now. And so I took it easy. Easy. It was not easy. Every step was hard, but it was an easy pace for a lot of people. And I ran into the finish. And
when did that hit you? When did you finishing your first 100, knowing what that 100 miles was like? When did it start to hit you on the road downhill? Before that? After that?
Well, Matt Van Horn kept. There was like a 5K going on the Bonneville Shore Trail. And there's all these fresh-looking people running down the hills that I'm trying to hike up. And I look pretty bad. I mean, I'm hiking up these things I feel like I'm moving, but it's slow.
Right. You're all cattywampus.
Yep.
Like, leaning over.
Yep. And I look like a homeless person.
Sure.
I have a jacket tied around my waist and like this old beanie. And
just dirty.
Yeah, covered in mud from head to toe. And he kept saying, This girl here, she's at mile 96. She's running 100 miles.
Yeah, you guys don't know.
She's running. She's running 100 miles. Like, he kept saying that to people, and part of me wanted to be like, stop saying that.
Stop it, Matt.
Stop it. But at the same time, I think that's sort of when it clicked. I was like, oh my gosh.
I'm going to finish.
I'm going to finish this thing. I'm going to run 100 miles. And that's
awesome.
Ultimately what I did.
Yeah.
I crossed the finish line. I pretty much fell into a chair that that my crew had pulled over to me, and one of the people working there said, "Oh, you're F3. That was F3." And I kind of wasn't paying. I kind of was.
What do you mean?
Confused.
F3?
I was like, "No, he's wrong." Like I literally thought, "No, he's wrong." There were there were 3 women in front of me. I mean, one who finished like hours and hours and hours earlier. Casey was just. I mean, she killed it. She could have maybe won the race, But I was like, no, that's not like I didn't. They're like, no, you just finished F3, and I just lost it. I mean, and it wasn't so much about finishing F3, but right there it just hit me. I had finished, and
it was cathartic, right?
Yeah,
you got that year buildup of just setbacks and anxiety and depression, not being able to run, and all of a sudden, in the most horrendous weather, you're F3.
I was F3,
That's
and it was over.
It was over.
Finished your 100. Time.
I know, and it was like it was unreal to me. Like the whole thing was sort of like a dream.
Surreal at that point, right?
It's like now what?
Yeah.
I know. I'm like, now what? Now I'm gonna sit down and relax. No, I mean,
gonna have
an
egg McMuffin.
Yeah.
I couldn't walk very well. It's funny. You cross the finish line of 100 miles and you're running. I mean, I was running at the end, and at that moment, I literally couldn't take a step. It was like my mind had told my body, "You're done now."
Right.
Well, it's like
you're done.
We set out for 100. You did 100. Now we're done.
We're done. Now you can't walk to the bathroom. Good luck.
Help, please. Where's the jazzy?
Yeah. So it just hit me. It was unreal.
So we so early, just during the show, we went ahead and did a little Instagram video as the show's been going on, and we've got a comment here, and this is kind of live, right? So
I guess, yeah.
Back half Barlow commented.
Oh,
on
of course
this,
he did.
And he says, I hope you ask Chelsea about her lame plan to the Zion Traverse instead of the Bear. So we kind of covered that.
I did.
So that's pretty
her
lame plan.
We did, Tommy. We got that.
We got that,
I brought it up, too. You didn't even have to ask.
We didn't have to prod you to get that one.
No, I told you straight
awesome.
up.
And then we got people saying, can't wait to hear it.
No.
So people are ready.
I'm excited.
So, I mean, with the race, I mean, now you've done through the recovery. Yep. You went into the race, and I think you mentioned a little bit your time goal. And I read your thing before. You had like an A, B, and C goal. Yep. They were kind of out the window because of the race.
Out the window.
But what was your
My A goal was sub 27.
Okay.
That was my A goal. And I had a lot of people tell me, you could do sub 26. I've run with you. And I just sort of was like, ha ha. You're funny. That's nice. I've never run. I had run a 93K. That was my longest run, and
but that was a hard
slow.
93K.
Yeah,
that's different.
That's tushy.
Yeah, I barely finished that.
Right.
But you finished, and a lot of people
finish.
don't finish
That's
that one.
Right.
That's true. And I mean, I had felt really strong at the end of my season. I felt good. But and then my B goal was sub 30.
Right.
And my C goal was just to finish.
So you hit all three, really.
Yeah.
I did.
So it's not just like your A goal.
No,
so
did.
with that race, I mean, since we don't know you real well, for you, obviously it was physical. But do you think just with that, mentally tough?
I think it was much more mentally tough than physically tough. And yes, I was tired, but the running was never the hard part of the race.
It was
the
just
running was never hard.
keeping your head and mind straight.
Yeah, I think, like you said, smiling a lot probably helped.
It did. And I mean, my pacers saved me for sure.
Right
having
on.
someone right there.
Yep.
I feel like there were, at the end, like I said, poor Matt Van Horn had it the worst.
Right.
But I'd like to think it didn't take much motivation to keep me moving.
Yeah.
But to have them just there talking to me was huge.
Yeah.
Because it was crappy. I mean, but the fact that they were out there, they could have been, this is really, really bad. I don't know if I feel comfortable pacing you in there.
Right.
But to have someone pace me 34 miles in freezing cold snowstorm and doing it happily was huge for me.
Yeah.
Well, and we talk about it all the time, but it's kind of the community.
It is.
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's your friends, but I mean, it's the stories. I mean, there's other people with pacers, just kind of the community.
Yeah. Well, and just seeing the other runners on the trail.
Yeah.
And props to, like, coming back after you leave Tony and coming back down and you see how many people still have so far to go.
Right.
Props to them for keep moving, because I don't know if at that point I would have had the
wherewithal
to
keep going.
To keep going through the conditions just got worse.
Right.
Not better. So I was really impressed with everybody there, and to see the grit and the determination of people to finish a race that you could have DNF'd and felt pretty good about.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you have nothing, the people that didn't finish, you have nothing to shake, lower your head about.
Absolutely.
No,
that's
the fact
not your
that they
typical
started.
race. Yeah.
Yeah.
The fact
Yeah.
that so many people started knowing what was in store was incredible to me. And
Right.
it was a really good bonding experience with those runners.
Mhm.
I wrote up last night a little something about a little race report of my own. And I mentioned in it, that unless you were there over those 100 miles, you just can't know. And I
Yeah.
know every 100 milers that way, but with
Right.
those types of conditions, like
It's
people can
it's
say,
rare.
oh, it was bad, it was rough. But you hear people who have run, I mean, how many 100 miles has Phil Lowry done? I don't know.
A couple.
One or two.
And said it was, the worst conditions he'd
Yeah.
ever seen. And
Right.
same with Kendall Wimmer and
Mhm.
other local people who have a lot of experience.
It was
under their
worse than
belt.
the rain bear.
Oh,
From what I
yeah.
heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, worse than the rain bear, worse than the polar bear.
Yeah,
they
the
had
polar
in-
bear was like 2006, and I
Yeah.
was there for that, and it was okay.
It
The rain
started
bear was
out
worse.
bad. Yeah, the rain bear was bad. But you still got like 18 hours of great weather.
Yeah, you did. The first
super
day
hot in the
was, oh my
afternoon.
God, the first day was so hot, but then
Yeah.
all of a sudden the skies opened up. This just started out cold and
Stayed
wet
cold the
and
whole time.
stayed that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
I was grateful. I don't know if it was the socks I used or what, but I didn't
Oh.
have a wrinkle on my foot.
So tell us what
My
socks you
feet.
wear.
Yeah,
I was
right.
using the CEP,
Yeah.
the
Compression
short
type?
compression, short ones, the
Okay.
ankle ones. They just go up, but they're a tight wool sock.
All right.
And I think having it tight against my skin helped.
Helped.
A ton.
Oh, yeah.
I wore one other pair. I had
What
3
shoes
of
did you
those.
wear for the
I was
first
wearing
85?
my Pearl Azumis.
For the first 85
For
miles?
the first 85 miles, I was wearing
The N.
N2 V3s.
Oh,
Gotcha.
the brand new ones.
Yeah,
Those
I
are.
think, I liked them. A wider toe box.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, they're the worst for slick stuff
Yeah.
generally, but the mud was so thick it didn't matter what
Didn't
shoe
matter.
you had.
Right.
So I figured I'd run one that I was at least comfortable in,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I love them. So
Those
I
are
ran
Right
that.
on.
Those are slowly
And then-
becoming my favorite shoe of all time.
And then I put crossovers on for the La Sportiva crossovers, but they were too stiff, and they're
Right.
a fairly narrow shoe.
Yeah.
I had a pair of Lone Peak Neo
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 Shell.
Shell.
Yeah.
like high-rise shoes, but
Right.
I'd never run in them before. I hadn't really adjusted them, and I didn't even think about them. But
That's probably a good idea.
I think that would have
Those
been
those
a
look
better
like a
shoe.
basketball shoe, don't they?
They're the hiking
Yeah.
boot.
Are those the
looking
high
one.
tops?
The
Yeah.
high tops.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If not using them and stuff, I think that's smart to stay away from them
Yeah,
for something
exactly.
like
so I
that.
stayed away, but I think it would have been better for me than my crossovers,
Right.
just because my feet were so swollen at that
Okay.
point. And
Well, you look great now.
Yeah.
thanks.
Like,
Well,
I mean-
it's a mirage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm putting on a show.
You are.
It
You are
still
putting-
hurts to walk.
I'm sure. But you're walking well.
Now I'm
Yeah.
walking.
Physically, mentally, you look like you're doing pretty good. What's next?
We're putting you on the spot.
I know. I may or may not do something short, or 50K or something in November,
Like the Antelope
like
Island
the Antelope
race.
Island.
That's a must-do race.
It's beautiful. I
for
mean,
around
I
here.
hear so many things that it's beautiful. It would be good to just sort of keep me up. I want to play.
Yeah.
I want to spend the rest of the fall and get, hopefully a little bit of the snow is melty and we can, have decent fall peak bagging.
Right.
Because I didn't get to
Flowers
play as much as I wanted to
Yeah.
this summer.
So what about next year, though? Anything on the radar for next year?
I'm sure I'll do another 100.
Yeah.
I'm saying that now, so I'm
Go back and do
committing.
Bryce.
Maybe Bryce. I
Yeah.
think that would be a huge one. Of course, I've had a few people say, well, now you have to do bear. Like, you have to do the
You have to do
actual
the bear,
bear
like a
course.
Good
a
year,
good
right?
year. It's hard. I feel like pressure now. I mean, I didn't
Ooh.
go out
Yeah,
there
don't
to
feel
do.
the pressure.
Yeah.
I don't
Keep
want.
it
I
fun.
know. I want,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. And I just got to keep doing. You take what the day gives you.
Right.
And even the best runners have bad days. I mean,
Yep.
I beat Jason Schlarb to right hand fork.
Yeah.
So,
Right on.
even the best runners have bad days.
Yeah.
But I just want to go out and see what I can do.
Yeah.
And
Make
that's
sure
why
you-
maybe the Zion Traverse, maybe doing a double or even just a single and doing that 50 miles, doing some adventure runs sounds like a really great way to
Yeah.
spend.
Have you done the Zion Traverse before?
haven't.
Okay, it's a must-do.
Yeah.
So make sure. Yeah, keep it fun, though,
That's
because you
nice.
see a lot of people that get caught up in it or feel the
Yeah.
pressure or expectations, and that's when you kind of lose
I'm not very
the...
competitive. Like I said, I've never really been like a fast runner, but I can suffer
Right.
and I can keep moving forward. And I think that was ultimately what led to my success at the Bear, was that I just didn't stop. It's unbelievable how many people I just passed at aid stations.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't because I was a faster runner. It's because I used my time wisely and
Yeah.
just kept moving.
Yeah,
So I can do that. I can keep moving.
that's all you got to do going forward.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Sometimes
having
it
me.
gets a little anxious when we reach out to somebody that we really don't know, to be
No.
honest with you. And then we're like, yeah, we do this thing in a van,
Right.
and we, so people get gun shy. So thank you for
Yeah.
making the drive down.
Oh,
Yep.
thank you.
She stood up.
Yeah, and
Big
your
time.
stories, the
a
story
good
itself
story.
is
Thank
amazing,
you.
and that's
Thank
why
you.
Even
we,
your backstory is good too.
yeah, like because we ask people how'd you get into running, and
Right.
it's not how'd you get into ultra running, and so to hear
No.
people, I knew ultras at a young age. I didn't know
Right.
ultras until I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about them. Never heard of them.
Yeah, well, I knew I ran in a 5K once, and I was the last person to cross the finish line, and I knew that wasn't for me.
that's one more
So-
5K than I've ever run.
They're horrible. I do not recommend. Don't recommend them.
They call them races too much. Keeps me out of it.
That's true.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Yes,
thank
you.
We really appreciate it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You
Thank
be
you.
super proud. Such a role model for your family, your
Yeah.
friends. Your kids are going to just soak this up
Yeah.
even as they get older and
I
understand
hope
it
so.
more.
3 little girls. I want them to know they can do whatever
That's
they put their
awesome.
mind to.
That's right.
That's awesome. So, yeah, congratulations.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us. Good luck in the future.
Thank you very
and
much.
when you do one of these other fun, crazy runs or another race, we'll get you back on.
Awesome.
sure.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks
Thanks,
for having
Chelsea.
me.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Trail Manners podcast. We'd like to thank Chelsea Hathaway for taking the time to join us in Studio 78 today. We'd also like to encourage everybody to head on over to our website at trailmanners.com. We still are doing some pre-orders for some sweet Trail Manners hoodies, as well as some of those Boco Gear pom-pom beanies. Don't miss out. The weather's changing. Keep nice and cozy. We also want to encourage you to head on over, contact us. Let us know what you want to see, who you want to hear, or if you would like to be on our show. So until next time, this is Eric Manning with Joel Hatch reminding you, you don't get what you wish for, you get what you work for. Now go get it.